Hey everyone, thank you for joining us today at Hazel Storm. For those that are new, at Hazel Storm, we are outdoor gear experts, gear enthusiasts, looking to give real life, practical, and technical outdoor gear recommendations and gear breakdowns. So if you're wanting some really basic, look at this gear, go find the link in my description. This isn't the place for you. We really go in the nitty gritty and want to learn the ins and the outs of the gear. So for all other outdoor gear enthusiasts, this is the place to go. We encourage everyone to like and subscribe to the channel, be notified of gear recommendation and gear breakdown videos in the future. You can visit our website at thehazelstorm.com or follow us on all major social media platforms. Just search Hazelstorm Gear to find us. So this video series is meant to be a long-form introduction to outdoor sports. So on our social media, we have a lot of like quick tips and tricks that are good to find. This is meant to be a more in-depth breakdown of those wanting to get into certain outdoor sports. So the first sport that we're going to be going into is caving. Now, caving is super different than any other sort of outdoor sports like mountaineering, skiing, snowboarding. It's not the sort of activity that's necessarily flashy, that makes for necessarily the best photos for the gram. Caves are dark, caves are dirty, caves are wet, and caves are cold. So there's no cell service, GPS doesn't work. At best, you got a compass. If you get lost, you might die. If you run out of light, you might die. If you get stuck, you might die. So there is no caving at all without quality gear, and you will risk your life with poor planning and poor gear planning. It takes a certain personality to get into caving. It's usually the type of who is very patient and thoughtful. So um, it takes quite a bit of courage to get into caving, and it's something that um, that not necessarily someone who's claustrophobic gets into. So uh, now, how getting into caving obviously is the first thing you got to think about. Um, it's a very tight knit community. It isn't necessarily like skiing. A place has resorts and tickets you can buy online and hotels you can stay at. It's very different from that. It's a very tight knit community, and cavers or spelunkers, as they're often called, are formed usually into groups called grottos. So if you go to like caves.org, the National Speleological Society has different grottos that are affiliated with them. So you just have to like select a state. We selected here in Utah since we're Utah based, and there's different grottos that you can join. They have Facebook groups, things like that. So that's a good way to get involved with finding what the local caves are and to know the ins and the outs of the local caves in your area, and get some good help from someone more experienced. Besides that, really just knowing a friend who's involved somehow in the caving community is the best way to get involved with it. So, um, what I don't want people to come away from this video is to know a few things about caves, Google the local caves in your area, buy a couple gear, and go out and expect it to all be fine. We'd really encourage people to seek some sort of mentorship by someone who's very experienced in caving before you seriously endeavor in this. And there's a few reasons for that. Is caves are often very dangerous. Like this is an example of a wet cave that has a lot of mud, and there's also dry caves that are often in deserts that are very different. And so the ins and the outs of wanting to know how to navigate the different caves are different, and obviously the gear that you want to carry is very different as well. Because the type of gear that you're going to want will vary by region. It'll vary by personal preference. And honestly, what I've learned through a lifetime of adventuring is there's always gear that I wish that I had, and then gear that I brought that I didn't need. So we can try to get the best sort of gear setup that we can, but ultimately it's not going to be perfect every time. Now, the reason that we emphasize so much um, getting mentorship from someone more experienced in the caving community, and be very wary about doing a DIY caving is because obviously accidents are pretty terrible, and and oftentimes naive cavers might put themselves in situations that are very terrible. And obviously here in Utah, there's this cave pretty close, the Nutty Putty Cave, in which there was kind of this novice a caver who ended up getting stuck in this cave, and unfortunately, he was not able to be rescued and passed away. And that obviously is very tragic to for someone less experienced to put themselves in a situation they didn't realize was so dire, and then having passed away. But also, it's tragic because oftentimes these accidents lead to these caves being closed by the government. So these caves, that's the reason that it's a tight knit community is they're very protective over their spaces, and vandalism and accidents. They unfortunately can hurt the community. So let's dive into the gear. We're gonna go over pretty much all the basic gear that you need over a lifetime of caving. Uh, and of course, you might have some personal preference, some gear that you like over time. And this excludes caving underwater. So this really is just dry and wet caves, but not wet caves that require diving. So the first and most important gear that you want to have ready is some sort of protective wear, whether that be a helmet, a climbing helmet, or something more specific to caving. There's a few different types of helmets that you can get, but largely they're categorized in two different types. There's a suspension and a foam helmet. So if you look here, the Vertex 5 by Petzl is a suspension helmet, and that's because it doesn't have foam. It's just a like an ABS shell, and it has a webbing inside to protect you. Versus a foam style, this is much more common, I suppose, and very similar to like bicycle helmets, in which they have like this shell and then this inner foam. So honestly, there's not too much of a difference besides personal preference. I think most experienced cavers probably lean more towards the suspension style, but the foam seems to be more common. And so that's why I heavily stress these helmets, because both of them are rated for rock climbing. That's what you're gonna find. You're gonna find ratings like here. Both of these are rated for rock falls, for falling rocks, things like that. As compared to something like a hard hat, I'd rather have you bring a hard hat than nothing at all. But these aren't necessarily rated for rock falls. They're more rated for like construction site falls, like a falling hammer, things like that. So it's better to go with maybe a hard hat or a bicycle hat, but ideally, if you really want um, uh, to have all your ducks in a row and want to really protect your head, obviously it's very important. You need to have something that's rated for climbing. So besides that, depending on the cave, you're going to want a knee pad and elbow pads. It's very important if you're obviously crawling on your hands and knees, which a lot of caves at some point you'll probably do that. So uh, if you're getting into it, oftentimes cavers will just opt for some volleyball knee pads, which are super cheap. You can find on Amazon, or some fairly cheap elbow pads that you can find online. Now, if you're wanting to opt for something more designed for cavers, there's this company in like the Kentucky sort of tri-state area that called Crawl Daddies, and these are designed by cavers for cavers in that region. So they're Velcro. They're a lot better because they're designed not to fall off as much and not to slide and slip inside, which is kind of the issue with the elbow pads and knee pads. So this is like a really small local guy who creates these Crawl Daddy knee and elbow pads just on Etsy. So that's certainly something you can do. They're a little more pricey, but a good investment. So next up, with caving, probably the most important thing is a flashlight. Because honestly, like if you don't have light, it's you're the risk of dying. So this is something you want to get something quality, probably even before a helmet. But yeah, obviously you're gonna want to bring a flashlight. So most cavers have three flashlight setup. You carry two headlamps, main headlamps, and one emergency backup, all with extra batteries. So when it comes to the different types of flashlights you can get, there's if we're looking first at the headlamps, what you're going to want is a flood lamp. Now there's two main different, or I guess there's just three different types of flashlights. So first is you have the spot lamp, like obviously like you're at the theater, there's a spotlight. It's very concentrated and not necessarily quite as applicable in caving. Usually what you're going to want is something that casts light more broadly. So if we have, for example, here, there's two different types, a flood and a floody. So the floodlight is a traditional light, while a floody adds a diffusion to the light. So here's an illustration that's very good is a floodlight. It casts light much farther, but it's much more hot and it can have hot spots when you're traveling through a cave. But if you get a floody or one that has like that um, the film over the light that diffuses it, it ends up having a much broader and soft light. So as compared to the spot, which obviously puts the light very far. So if you're going with the two headlamp, one emergency flashlight backup, I think it'd be good probably to get a flood and a floody. And on our website we illustrate Zebra Light is a super awesome brand made in Shenzhen in China, and they run about $100 a piece, which is pretty reasonable for a good quality headlamp. So when it comes to headlamps, you can obviously go for something cheaper. Sulfurin is a good one, and they have some pretty reasonable ones for about $20. Now, the reason to probably go with something more higher range is because the lumens you can adjust. Like you see here, it can go all the way to 0.08 lumens up to 1500 lumens. So obviously, you're probably not going to go that bright, maybe for taking photos or something like that. But the real good part is if you're suffering, low battery, you can decrease the amount of lumens to pretty low to get your battery to last. So, and in general, the more lumens that you're using, the less battery life you have, and the lower amount you have more battery life. The second really crucial thing when looking for a flashlight is to look at the waterproof ratings. We see here it says IPX8 waterproof, IPX8 waterproof, and then IPX8 waterproof. What that is referring to is how long it can be underwater. So largely an IPX8, anything that says IP and ends in an 8, means that it can be underwater for an extended period of time, like 1 meter or more continuously. Well, an IPX7 means that the flashlight is rated to be at 1 meter of water for 30 minutes. So if we compare that against the emergency flashlights that we're recommending, this is an IPX7. The mag lights aren't necessarily rated to be underwater for extended periods of time, but it's rated to be at 1 meter for 30 minutes. So it does have some waterproof compared to IPX4 or just water resistance. These aren't designed to be submerged, but might offer some sort of like splash protection. So largely what I would do is go for IPX7 or IPX8, but if you're really wanting to get something that's durable, focus on the IPX8. So those are some important things. Bring two headlamps. I'd recommend, if you're able to spend it, get two Zebra lights, one that's a floody and one that's a flood, and they run about $100 a piece right now. So as for the emergency flashlight, honestly, it's up to your discretion. You can really get three headlamps if you want, but I find mag lights are super durable for a whole bunch of different things, and they're they have AA batteries generally. Or AAA batteries, and you can bring some of these just as a backup, but you're going to really want to bring these two headlamps with extra batteries as your main setup. So when it comes to food and water, caves are generally pretty cold, so what you're going to want to do is prepare for that, and also be very careful about the sort of food that you bring, especially things that are much too cold or things that you need to heat up. So when it comes to food and water, if you're going out for a water bottle, something cheap, because caves are extremely dirty. Obviously, as you see this photo, it's like this will wreck your gear, which is another very crucial part of caving is the gear doesn't last. Like if you buy a really good if you buy this really good down coat, you can take it on a whole bunch of outdoor adventures over years. But caving, the idea that you have gear that lasts a long time is very unusual. Like you're gonna have to replace gear quite a bit, especially if it's a very dirty cave. So that's why I'd offer something pretty reasonably priced and something plastic. So if you really want, you can get a classic Now Gleam bottle. It's about $17, 32-ounce capacity, or you can bring a couple of these smart water bottles, which are really the bread and butter of outdoor adventure. These smart water bottles with a classic, like traditionally sized lid. if you're opting for a gas stove, if you want to bring some food to cook, especially if it's a bigger cave, these pocket rockets are super great. Or even if you want to get something off Amazon, this Primus uh, stove works really well. Now, when it comes to metal pots, probably the two that I would recommend either is a titanium or a stainless steel, depending if you're wanting to just heat water. I'd opt for more of the titanium. Whether if you're wanting to like cook stews or actually heat something up on the stainless steel, it's better, largely because the titanium um, tends to burn things on the bottom. So water only, go with titanium since it's so much lighter. When you can obviously bring fuel for your stove, and then we have a handle or a spoon. That's titanium. That's really great for any sort of outdoor adventure, honestly. So after that, we focus in on the gloves. There's largely two different types of gloves to go for when you're caving. First is depends if it's a wet or a dry cave. And for those that don't know, like wet cave, it's wet, dry is dry. So, um, that's really going to determine the sort of glove setup you're going to have. The two different types that most people opt for are either work leather gloves or rubber gloves. Now, if you're going to go for work gloves, probably the go-to, like on the left here, at the 511, you have the like leather, which this goat skin leather, it's pretty high quality. I think if uh, you're likely to be a lot more rough, and so opting for some more reasonably priced leather gloves might be good. Or these mechanics work gloves are honestly very tested and tried, and very comfortable and easily dryable gloves. Now, when it comes to wet caves, Nalgaline gloves or nitrile gloves, sorry, are very, very common and very, very good. So either, depending on how warm the cave is, how cold the cave is, you would opt for either the freezer glove, which this is waterproof and insulated, or these nitrile dipped gloves that are not insulated but very water resistant. And you can oftentimes just bring a handful of different gloves you can swap out. So as for footwear, that largely also is determined by if it's a wet or dry cave. Usually, if it's a dry cave, what you're going to do is opt for hiking boots. Well, if it's a wet cave, you're going to look more for rubber boots or wellies, as they say in the UK, um, to protect your feet. So hiking boots, obviously caving, um, especially if you're going through tight tunnels, can ruin your boots. So having something not necessarily like super high class like this Loa, maybe opting for something more reasonably like this Merrill boot. If you're wanting rubber boots, most people go with rubber or PVC boots. You can get pretty reasonably priced on Amazon or at Cabela's. So when it comes to stocks, this is something super crucial because in caves, what you're going to want to do is avoid cotton at all costs unless the cave is super dry. Now that presents an issue because I think of all the types of material that you can get for like not even just socks, but shirts, pants, cotton is super durable. But unfortunately, cotton absorbs water, which is an issue if it's at all wet. So if it's a dry cave, you can opt for some cotton, but in general, I'd much avoid that for more synthetic fabrics like polyester, nylon, things like that. So when it comes to socks, um, something very thick, darn tough is a classic, great merino wool sock. They're fairly pricey, but they're ultra durable, and merino wool wicks moisture fantastically, like arguably even better than some of these synthetic blends like polyester, wool, spandex. So if it's a dry cave, I think I'd opt for these darn tough socks. They're, like in the name, they're darn tough. And when it comes to waterproof socks, what you're going to look for is neoprene socks. So neoprene is a type of waterproof material, and the perfect setup would be to have a sock that is neoprene that is lined with wool, because wool is very warm. And so these Skeelsins, they're about $70 a piece right now. They come up to the mid length, but they really get the job done. They're lined with that really warm and moisture wicking merino wool, but at the same time, they have a neoprene layer that makes it waterproof. Or you can opt for a sock without that special wool lining and just get the neoprene sock for pretty reasonably priced on Amazon. And even bringing a couple pairs of these isn't necessarily the biggest lift for emergencies. So when it comes to clothing, just like I said, really what you're going to want to do is cotton is probably the most durable. An uber dry, cave out in the desert, it probably might do some cotton because it can really withstand quite a bit of abrasion. Well, synthetics won't necessarily be able to as much, but if it's at all wet, at all wet, there's not a lot of airflow to dry you out, and it's caves usually pretty humid, oftentimes and colder. So if you're wet, you're unlikely to get dry. So as for this top base layer, if it's at all cold, having some sort of base layer is really good. You can either opt for this smart wool, which is this merino wool base layer, or you can do something more synthetic for pretty reasonably priced. 32 Degrees has really great deals for base layers, and you're gonna, depending on the cave, obviously look at having these in your gear setup. And when it comes to shirt and pants, avoid jeans. Jeans will not dry in a cave. So jeans are really great because they're protect against abrasion. They don't tear easily. So that's nice, but really, if the cave is at all wet, you're gonna want to go for something more synthetic, like the Cool brand and these Moose Hill pants. They're a polyester or nylon and spandex, so spandex will be very stretchy and comfortable, but of course it's not very abrasion resistant. So you're gonna want to get something that's very light, and keep in mind that if you get something very expensive, there's a real chance, depending on the cave, that you will destroy these clothing. So maybe offer something a little more cheaper, but something more quality, like these Cool items might last a little longer. So next, when it comes to some sort of jacket, caves can get pretty cold. So if you bring a good soft shell, it seems to be a pretty good breathable alternative. Either that or a puffer jacket, a pretty cheap puffer jacket that you're not too concerned about. So yeah, if you're wanting to bring a jacket. Now, if it's a wet cave, there's a few different options for a waterproof suit. There's two different brands here, the Caving Coverall and the Adventure Vertical. These are a fair big investment. It's about $200 to buy one of these. But what's really cool about these options is they're both waterproof, and they have reinforced knee and elbow pads. At least the Caving Coverall has reinforced elbow pads. This just has reinforced knees. And these are made for caving, and they're waterproof. So if it's wet, yeah, you're going to want to opt for something like this. Something to have in your lineup when you're caving: a good beanie, a good scarf. Like this is a buff that's made of merino wool, and maybe having a reasonably priced down packable jacket is often good to have. So when it comes to backpacks, obviously you got to put all your gear in a backpack. So getting a backpack that fits your specific cave is extremely crucial. So what you have to do first is that you're going to prepare for bags to be destroyed. Oftentimes these backpacks, you're going to be pushing through crevices. You're going to be in water that's going to go through mud. And so there really is no such thing as a long-term caving backpack. And so you expect your gear to rip, tear, and fill over time. And so what oftentimes these cavers do is they'll buy a lot of different budget backpacks that are reasonably priced and that you replace on a regular basis. And so you can either do that, or there's this setup where you just get a regular backpack and have a dry bag inside. So it can help having different dry bags, because if you have one tear in your main backpack that's a dry bag, then all your gear is SOL. But if you get a backpack and put multiple small dry bags inside, then it helps like spread out your risk. So it like diversifies your leak risk, so to speak. Put your flashlights and batteries in separate Ziploc bags when you're setting up your gear, for obvious reasons. So when it comes to a caving backpack, I have a few different options here. We have this QE, very, very expensive $400 submersible backpack. Honestly, like unless you're, this is probably the best if it's wet, but you're not expected to push this around through any sort of channels or tunnels. Well, the Swago push pack, it's something around $150 right now. And they come in different sizes, so the bigger ones are more expensive, but these are much thicker plastic made for caving. So, if you can pay for it, certainly go with that. Well, if you look on the right, these Marchway bags you can find on Amazon for like 15, 20 bucks for different sizes, and you can. A lot of cavers will just get these cheap bags and then they'll tear over time, and then you just replace them. So, if you can pay for it, I'd probably opt for these Swago. But if not, you can get these Marchway bags on Amazon. If it's a dry cave, you can go for any sort of traditional hiking day pack. Something that's waterproof here, like this Osprey Downburst or this non-waterproof Scarab, or you can get a hiking day pack from Amazon that's more budget, around 50 bucks. So with caving, if it's dry and these aren't super tight areas, then these day packs are super convenient. You can use for any sort of other outdoor adventure. So next up, when it comes to climbing, there's a couple of different types of caves that are dry. There's vertical caving, and then there's like horizontal, I suppose. But vertical caving essentially means that you're going to need climbing gear. Like in this example, in the Temponagus Grotto, you have someone rappelling via a rope. And so this is probably the part that's the most expensive and the most different. Like the type of gear you're going to want really is going to depend on the cave, the region, like your personal preference. But we're going to go over all the major gear. Like if you're looking to get into vertical caving, obviously do it alongside someone who's more experienced and someone who knows what they're doing. But if these are gear you'll likely need. So when it comes to vertical gear, first is rope. Now, there's usually specialized rope with caving because it's very, very hard on your rope. Like, for example, this photo right here, the amount of dirt and mud that is on this rope is a climber's nightmare. Like, this is a rope that won't last. Like, you're going to need to replace this rope pretty soon. Like, all this dirt and water is going to destroy the integrity of this rope over time. So that's why cavers, you're going to get specialized rope that's made for it, but expect to need to change it over time. So this PMI pit rope is probably the go-to most vertical cavers will opt for. So next is a caving harness. Now the difference between a caving harness and traditional climbing harnesses, the first is that you see here it's much more like water resistant. It's very much plastic and is set up to be able to descend and ascend, and doesn't have a lot of the extra things that you might have in a traditional climbing harness. So this right here is a chest harness that you likely need from Adventure Vertical. Now, of course, if you're going up and down, you're going to need a ascender or a descender, but they're fairly big investments that you can actually use for quite a bit of other outdoor activities. So like these are more caving specific, but this is something that might be in the gear box of any sort of climber. There's some other outdoor vertical gear that I recommend. There's this foot sling from Petzl. You of course can get a cow's tail to help you with certain techniques for getting up and down. Cords, slings, obviously carabiners, something that locks for your main carabiner, and then a lot of these non-locking carabiners as well. Now, what I haven't included here is this largely is set up just if you're going to ascend and descend, but if you're going to need to do any sort of climbing, you're going to need something to help attach you to the rocks. So like like something to like that includes like cams, like things like that, bolts, nuts, to be able to help with the rock climbing. But largely, if you're going to get involved, I'd probably opt for first this rope, and it can get pretty pricey depending on the length of the rope. Getting a couple harnesses, an ascender and descender, and a couple odds and ends like slings and cords and carabiners to get started. So it isn't too. It is a little investment, but if you get some of these things, go with someone who's experienced that can teach you how to use them. There's a few miscellaneous gear that you can bring when you're caving. Just off the top of my head, I think first is any sort of knife is crucial when it comes to climbing. And these co-pilot knives are blunt end knives designed to help like cut rope, cut cord. So I'd probably bring a knife, especially this one, super awesome blunt end knife, as well as any sort of medical kit. So this is a first aid kit, adventural medical kits. It's waterproof. It's very lightweight, only 8 ounces. It's great. When it comes to other sort of gear, bring a power bank. You can get something waterproof, like from Goal Zero, or you can get something on Amazon's Anchor is only $20, and is pretty good quality. If you have it in a Ziploc waterproof bag. Bring a watch, something super durable, as you see once again. Like this isn't necessarily super unusual. This is a very dirty cave. Not all of them are like that, but a lot of them are. So getting something reasonable, this Casio is a really great go-to. A compass, one of the only things that you can actually use in a cave for locating yourself. You can get super disoriented. You can't use the stars to find your location. So bringing a map as well as a compass can help prevent you from being lost. And obviously, the best thing you can do, go with someone who knows what they're doing. Go with someone who's been in the cave, as well as bringing a map and a compass to help orient yourself. So, water filter. The water in caves super unreliable. Could be good, could be bad. There could be remains, excrements. Like it might not be the best. So pack in just this water filtration system, the Sawyer Squeeze that can attach right in onto your smart water bottle is really good to do, as well as maybe an emergency thermal blanket. So that kind of wraps it up. The basic gear that you'll need to start caving. Feel free to post any questions in the comments. Would be more than happy to go into specific gear, and visit our website at thehazelstorm.com, and we have this page about caving that you can click on the links, which will take you to REI or Cabela's, or directly to, like, for example, this Petzl website to get you what you need. So thank you everyone, and have a good day.